Okay, day 182, this is part 3. One of the updates I wanted to give was for the Veterans Affairs, and when the new Veterans Affairs Secretary would come in. The current guy, you remember Shulkin, the egregious reports that came out in region after region, all kinds of problems with the opiate crisis getting worse, drugs being diverted, drugs not being prescribed correctly, opiate overdoses, suicides, just about everything you could imagine just getting worse by the day. So obviously you have to make a change there. The person is Ronnie Johnson, Rear Admiral Ronnie Johnson, who's been the kind of the doctor of the presidents the last 12 years, Bush, then Obama, and then Trump. And I think, people are going to, he's going to go to committee next week, October 25th, in front of, I believe, Isaacson's Veterans Affairs Committee. They're probably going to hit him on experience, hey, you've only been doctor to the president. But really, at this point, I think what's needed more than anything is ethics. Ethics in that job, and somebody who can speak clearly about what the new direction of VA is going to be. I was with task force with a Navy vet last night who also happens to be a clinical, he was an organizational psychologist, task force being clinical psychologist. Have a shout out, task force, sorry.
Hey, shout out.
Shout out for all clinical psychologists out there. Sorry, I'm not letting task force talk. But they had a really interesting conversation about current PTSD. This is kind of task force's specialty. And this guy was on the Eisenhower, the aircraft carrier Eisenhower. And can you want to summarize just a little bit about the shortcomings of the current PTSD?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people, it's just a complete misunderstanding of PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, they've attempted in the past couple of years to take the D off because it's not actually a disorder, it's an injury. And it's an injury to the kind of biochemical system, nervous system.
Directly at what you said.
To him?
Yeah, and what is wrong now that needs to be changed?
Well, so the guys that are coming in for PTSD, if you don't, he's talking about, he's an organizational psychologist, so he's like, how do you get the organization to move together for the patients, the doctors, the nurses, everybody to be copacetic? I've been on the other end where people with PTSD, even struggling with PTSD myself, you need such confidentiality, and then you go into a government therapist or psychologist, whatever, and those records, which you believe to be confidential, I have had people tell me, then they're used against them. So you can't actually even tell your truth.
So privacy is one issue.
Yeah, privacy and...
I think you also said something about ineffectiveness, though, that everyone was kind of treated the same.
Yeah.
Not a lot of time in terms of in-depth interview.
Right, so, treating PTSD, it's probably the hardest, and you get most psychologists say this, hardest thing to treat. And there's a lack of understanding amongst people and veterans, but a lot of psychologists on how to treat this. And there have been some very effective things that have come out, but it's often trapped and not allowed to be used with veterans, or because therapists don't understand. They really need experienced, qualified people that are trained with soldiers, with combat soldiers or law enforcement. Because that kind of PTSD is separate from a lot of other, car accident PTSD, things like that.
And what I came away with was there needs to be a lot more people that are veterans,
yes,
that are doing this job, and not third parties that have been kind of brought in and
right.
been given a quick Six Sigma weekend lean course,
right.
But more veterans who've actually been in combat, veterans who've actually had these situations where they've been at these refugee camps and seen some of those horrors. And so we'll probably just leave it at there. I did the one story that he told about the Navy SEALs taking over a whole ship, with zip tying the whole crew, even in an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
I thought, how do you do that without scopolamine? How do you do that without fentanyl? How do you do that without spraying the deck? And there's no other way. A small Navy SEAL team could take a whole ship, but he said that his ship participated in that activity.
Yeah.
So
those
okay.
Navy SEALs are,
So what happens if you had an irregular warfare center, and let's say it was called the Kennedy Irregular Warfare Center. Let's say it was in Fayetteville, or Fayetteville, North Carolina. Let's say you had a rogue Navy intel irregular warfare group, and then you decided to start using it on people in the United States. You decided to use that against your political targets.
That'd be a huge problem.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that that's not what's happened. So anyway, we'll get more to that 333 and half evil a little bit later. It seems like Q's talking a lot about evil lately.
Pure evil is being said literally in everyone because of what they're uncovering.
And I'm only saying half evil. I'm only saying 333.
He's gone all the way to pure.
So he's all the way to pure. I'm only halfway there. I'm only half evil with the 333 program. Okay, we'll get more for you later as information makes itself available.